This is the challenge of our time, to figure out how to prevent Congress's chronic abuse of its own borrowing authority from collapsing under its own weight and from bringing about the economic collapse of the United States of America. We have to have these structural spending reform mechanisms because our government is run by imperfect people. Benjamin Franklin has often been quoted for the line that says, "He'll cheat without scruple who can without fear." I think when looking at Congress today, he might say, Congress will spend more money than it has whenever it possibly can, whenever it has the option of spending more. As Madison said, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. And if angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. We are, as human beings, not angels, and our government isn't run by angels either. This is why we need these structural, permanent spending reform mechanisms. We cannot afford to accept a substitute here, a cheap imitation, a Trojan horse balanced budget amendment, like Senate Joint Resolution 24. Because if we adopt something like that, we will create the illusion to the American people that we are actually undertaking efforts to control our out-of-control deficit spending problem, when in fact we're doing nothing. Because it's always the case that we're involved in a military conflict somewhere. Congress will always be able to muster a simple majority saying, we can't be expected to balance our budget right now because of that. We've got to draw that line in the sand. We've got to stand for those who support everything from defense to entitlements. We've got to stand up for our children and our grandchildren, and those who will come after them, those who are not yet old enough to vote, those who have not yet been born, those whose parents have yet to meet. Those people aren't here to vote against us as we spend their money. This is a particularly pernicious form of taxation without representation. We fought a war over 2 centuries over that pernicious practice. We won that war, and we shouldn't subject our children and their children and grandchildren after them to that same practice. This is contrary to liberty, it's contrary to economic prosperity, and we can't stand for it to occur anymore. So we really have 2 choices. One choice involves supporting, passing, and submitting to the states for ratification the Hatch-Lee Balanced Budget Amendment proposal, putting some permanent restraint at long last on Congress's self-destructive borrowing capacity. The other option can take many forms. It can take the option of supporting Senate Joint Resolution 24, which doesn't solve the underlying problem, or it can take the form of doing nothing at all. You see, if we do nothing at all, we've still made a choice. We've made a devastating choice, a choice that will inure to the detriment of the American people and of the federal programs that we all rely on, the federal programs that people rely on to keep them safe, to protect them from the ravages of nature, to protect them from the conditions of poverty that we seek to avoid in this country. It is, after all, the objective of all of us to seek for a better, more prosperous, more safe country. But we jeopardize all of those interests the longer we allow this practice of perpetual deficit spending to continue. At the end of the day, we have to face our own constituents. Those who choose not to vote for the Hatch-Lee Balanced Budget Amendment will have to face their constituents and tell them why they were unwilling to stand for a proposition so basic as we should balance our budget. There is no excuse based on the fact that we can't do this overnight because this has a delayed implementation clause. It won't take effect until 5 years after it's been ratified by the states. In the meantime, we'll be able to set in motion a sequence of events, a series of implementing bills that will allow us to put ourselves on a smooth glide path toward balancing our budget. We'll be able to do that. Those who vote against the Hatch-Lee Balanced Budget Amendment can't look their constituents in the eye and tell them they did everything they could do to get our out-of-control spending habits, our out-of-control deficit spending habits under control. I urge each and every one of my colleagues to do this for themselves, for the programs that they want to save, to do this for their children and their grandchildren. Our prosperity, our success as Americans, our survival as a nation, and the success of our government require nothing less. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.